Good afternoon. Welcome back to Passion World Talk Radio, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain, and let's not forget mindfulness. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing about the dangers of executive orders. The article was written by Richard Kreitner in The Nation, and his title is A Warning About the Dangers of Executive Orders from 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Well, that was during the reign, the presidency of Ronald Reagan, who also did the same thing and went on a real executive order spree. At that time, the nation also sounded an alarm about the kind of presidential overreach or grab that we're seeing from our present administration. The article came out March 7th, 2025, and if you look under The Nation and put Mr. Richard Kreitner's Kreitner name in, you will find the article. Mr. President has started his second term with a barrage of executive orders. Some of them have been challenged in court. Some of them have managed to gone through. Some of them he's experimenting to see how far he can go before people actually do something about it. However, he is openly attempting to govern not by law, but what he wants. And he believes that by the sheer volume and scope, and he doesn't get any resistance from Congress or a pushback from the courts, which are known to be notorious slow to start out with, it shakes the very foundations of our Constitution, government, that have not been tested since the Civil War. Interesting thought, huh? Well, throughout its history of 160 years, the nation has celebrated some executive orders and have opposed others. The magazine's opinions of these actions have been generally focused on the merits of the policy change rather than larger and constitutional questions about the limits of presidential authority. In 1951, an editorial note, for instance, cheered on by an order by then President Harry Truman seeking to advance racial integration and in the defense industry as a, quote, gesture of support for civil rights, unquote. Well, just a few years earlier, another president, Truman, ordered aimed at stamping out disloyalty in the executive branch was described by our eminent historian Henry Steele Commanger as, quote, an invitation to precisely that kind of witch hunting which is repugnant to our constitutional system. What might have commenter had made of the present president's efforts to get federal employees to inform on Congress when they're suspecting of concealing DEI initiatives? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I was born and raised during the 1950s, World War II, Hitler, concentration camps, dictatorships were quite the thing being brought up, along with Stalin and what he did in the Soviet Union, as it was then called, not to mention some of the other newcomers on the block, Iran, Afghanistan, and nations like Ukraine, Germany, East and West Germany, East and West Berlin, Korea, North and South Korea, still divided. However, the objections to the content of executive orders have now become full-throated critiques of presidential grab for power, precisely on the grounds that such authority might be abused someday by an unscrupulous president with no respect for constitutional limits on his power and has made up his mind he's not going to obey the courts because he who saves his country is above the courts. And we all know what happened to Napoleon Bonaparte if Mr. President does not. He died exiled on Elba, suspicions that he was poisoned. In June 11th, 1983, an issue of The Nation, John Shattuck, a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union, wrote a front page story headline, quote, "Executive Order Mania, Cutting Back on Freedom by Fiat." Over its first 2.5 years, Shamak observed the Reagan administration had used executive orders not merely to institute new policies of other administrations had, but to make the White House a de facto legislative branch of the government. And one function of those executive orders was to provide an aura of legitimacy for presidential actions that might otherwise be challenged as illegal. Oh, bringing back memories already of the first 7 weeks of the present president's stay in office. By openly asserting these actions and presidential orders, Reagan was given a sheen of legality to the kinds of covert domestic operations against political opponents that Nixon had ordered secretly just a decade before. You would think we would learn, but apparently we haven't. Shattuck was especially troubled by Reagan's orders allowing the CIA to conduct surveillance within the United States, a practice formally banned by law and compelling federal agencies to declare more information as classified. Is that right up there with getting rid of all the safeguards that we have put in to our great nation? So by getting rid of these people and these organizations, it gives him a hand free of whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. Something to think about. Is this a precursor where the present president, with his war against the DEI, and require birth control clinics to inform the parents of patients under 18 who seek reproductive care? And most alarming to Mr. Shattuck were the executive actions that took aim at individual rights protected under the First Amendment, including one that effectively censored public speech by former government officials, while he's now going after the universities for people who protest. And it's not for the foreign exchange students. It also appeals to those who are natural born citizens of the United States. They'll be censored, they'll be kicked out, they'll be sent to prison. Sooner or later, he may make it mandatory for people to watch public hangings on TV or to see people shot the way they did in South Carolina of that prisoner. They can always make excuses and they can always twist the law to make it sound right. But are you just going to stand there and take it until they come for your child? Well, some of the topics of the Reagan orders that Shattuck denounced have more to do with that time than our own, but a larger question of how such actions could be used to chisel and then break the pillars of constitutional government is very relevant today. As Shattuck wrote, this spreading pattern of presidential lawmaking could eventually become an usurpation of power, at least as great as that which occurred during the imperial presidency a decade ago. A reference to Mr. Nixon. The rampant proliferation of executive orders as a substitute for actual legislation, he warned, might empower our future president to weaponize the government and persecute his personal and political enemies. Already, Reagan was showing the path ahead. And that's exactly what this president is doing now. He's going after law firms, breaking contracts with them, and forbidding them to open their mouths and speak the truth, because the only truth he'll allow is his vision of Mother Earth. Father Earth. He thinks all women are incapable of thinking. What was I thinking, huh? On the eve of 1984, Shattuck wrote, the great communicator, a master of Orwellian doublespeak, tells the country that his executive orders are law, and therefore government by executive order is not lawless. Big Brother could not have stated the case more concisely, nor more usefully for the current president, who has gone far beyond anything Reagan ever contemplated by explicitly declaring his intention to rule solely by autocratic decree. So if you have any thoughts about what's going on, read several of the articles that Mr. Kreitner has written and have your mind blown. Because I can assure you now is not the time to run into your back wall and stick your head into the sand, ignoring what is going on. Otherwise, you may end up like the Japanese who were put into internment camps, or the Jews who were slaughtered like so much herd of cattle in the concentration camps, or the blacks, or the disabled. Oh, wait, formerly disabled and black people, the women were castrated. Well, the male version of castrated, so they wouldn't bring that kind of kids into the world. But I got bad news for Mr. President. That doesn't excuse him. He can land up with a grandchild like that. Oh, yes, he can. If wishes were horses, we would all be kings. Oh, yes, I forgot. He declared himself king of New York and of the country. What am I thinking? Thank you very much for joining us. Please remember, if you need help with research, contact PWR Network LLC at gmail.com, and you will receive a 15 minutes free consultation. Tell me what you need. You will receive a contract and a form that you fill out with everything you need. And what do you get? You get the URLs and book titles and authors and the whole shebang, so you can check out where I got your research information from. You'll be provided with keywords, key tags, and most of all, summaries of everything that I have researched for you. If it's not on that form that you fill out for PW Talk Radio, then you won't get it. And if you want it, it'll be considered a separate contract with a separate form to fill out. Also, join the AI revolution. You know you want to. Check out our website, aiwithlillian.com. Have a good read, see what the demo can show you, and then sign up for a monthly subscription. You know you want to do it. If you don't join the bandwagon now, you will lose it. AI is here to stay. It's a no-brainer. If you want to go through our website, passionworldtalkradio.com/services, you'll find out everything you need to know. And the whole thing with AI with Ruby is very self-explanatory, and it will help you very much. We'll give a shout out to Betsy Wurtzel for providing us for daily Monday tips. If you have a tip you would like to share to the whole world and the galaxy, send it in to PWR Network LLC at gmail.com with your name, and don't forget the tip. Thank you very much for listening, and remember, have an awesome weekend.